After the Torah relates how the animals were created, and then how Adam and his wife were created on the sixth day of creation, including also what Hashem says to Adam and Chava, and he blesses them. Hashem says to them, Peru revu, be fruitful and multiply, uredu bidgas hayam, you will rule over the fish of the sea and all the animals, etc. The Torah says two psukim in connection to the food of Adam and the animals. The pasuk says like this: Vayomer Elokim, Hashem says, Hine nosati lochem es kol esev zoirei azera. I have given you all sorts of grass and vegetation that has seeds, things that grow. Lochem yiyah la'achla, that's what you're going to eat. Then the next pasuk says, Ulechol chayas haaretz, and all of the animals of the earth, v'chol oif hashamayim, and the birds of the heaven, and so on. Es kol yerek esev la'achla, they are going to eat the things that grow, the vegetation, the grass, and so on. So Rashi quotes the end of this first pasuk and the beginning of the next pasuk. Rashi quotes, Lochem yiyeh la'achla, this is what you're going to eat. This is what's the first pasuk when it's speaking about Adam and his wife. And then the beginning of the next pasuk, L'chol chayas haaretz, and all the animals. And Rashi says, Hishva lahem behemoth v'chayas lamachol. Hashem is equating, Hashem is making equal the animals to Adam and Chava and what they're going to eat. And Hashem did not allow Adam and his wife to kill a creature to eat its meat. Rather, rather altogether, both people and animals are going to be eating the vegetables and things that grow. Now, simply, the fact that Hishvala and Behemoth v'chayis l'machal, the fact that Hashem is making equal the people and the animals and what they eat, is coming to tell us that Adam and his wife are not allowed to eat meat. As the Gur Aryeh explains, that just like Behemoth v'chaya are only allowed, or Einam Oichlim only eat, Esav only eat the grasses, so to Adam, so to the man, Achilase Esav only eats the vegetables and the grass, things that grow, and nothing else. However, says the Rebbe, as the Lavush asks, this is seemingly difficult to explain Rashi like this. Number one, how is it that from equating the Behemoths and the Chayos to Adam and Chava, how is it that from this we could learn out that a person is not allowed to eat meat, when practically we see that many of the Chayos are animals of prey, many of the animals are animals of prey who do eat the meat of beasts. And it's very difficult to say that Rashi is of the opinion that before the sin, there were no animals of prey in the world, and it's only as a result of the sin that their nature changed. Because such a tremendous chidush, Rashi should have mentioned somewhere in his pirush, or at least hinted to that. Says the Rebbe, another one of the Mefarshim, the Rabbi Eliyahu Mizrahi, learns the pshat of saying that the person is similar to the animals, that just like the animals are not allowed to eat the person, so to a person is not allowed to eat a creature to eat its meat. However, says the Rebbe, it's difficult to say that this is what Rashi meant, because then seemingly the main point is missing from Rashi. Rashi should have mentioned this idea that animals are not allowed to eat humans. And on the other hand, says the Rebbe, as the Gur Aryeh asks, why do we even need this comparison between the person and the animals to be able to learn that Adam and his wife are not allowed to eat meat, when that's seemingly the simple meaning of the pasuk? The pasuk says, I gave you all the grasses to eat. In other words, Hashem is permitting them to eat the vegetables, the grass, the things that grow. As Rashi himself says later on in the Pirush, Ki yerek esav sheitarti la'adam harishan, like the grass that I permitted to Adam harishan. In other words, the only thing that he's given permission in this pasuk to eat is the things that grow and nothing else. And therefore, automatically, obviously, he's not allowed to have meat. And finally, the Rebbe says, the most important thing is, Rashi's idea is to come and explain the simple meaning of the pasuk. What was difficult in our pasuk that Rashi even needs to explain and needs to answer by saying that Hashem is making Adam and the animals equal in what they eat? The Rebbe now turns to a number of diyukim, to specific wording in Rashi itself. Number one, says the Rebbe, why is Rashi using such an unusual expression, Veloy Hirsha, and Hashem did not allow Adam to kill animals in order to eat their meat? It almost sounds like a bit of a narrative or a story. Why can't Rashi just say simply, Avol Basar, but meat is Asar, it's forbidden, and that's it? Or a similar expression. Point number two, says the Rebbe, Rashi adds And he is medayik. It seems to be a diuk over here, specific wording where he says that he's not allowed to kill a creature and eat its meat. Rashi doesn't just say simply, b'kitzur, that they're not allowed to eat meat. It seems to be implying that eating the meat itself, let's say if the animal would have died on its own, would have been permissible. It's only that he's not allowed to kill the animal to eat it. So the Rebbe says, what is the hechrich? What's forcing him, pshutei shel mikra, to say that he is allowed to eat meat as long as the animal died by itself? Point number 3, says the Rebbe. Why does Rashi then have to repeat in Bereishis, rather, ach kol yerek esev yoichlu yachad kulam? Instead, they have to all eat the vegetables, the things that grow together. After Rashi said originally already, Rashi pointed out already, that they're not allowed to eat meat, and especially that the Pasuk says that the Yerek Esev, the vegetation, the grass that grows, is for food, for the people and for the animals. So why does Rashi have to add this arichus? The Rebbe now continues to the next point of Rashi, which we did not quote yet. Rashi continues, when the children of Noach came along, hitir lohem basar, now Hashem permitted them to have meat, as the pasuk says, kol remes asher uchai, all the moving things that are alive, in other words, animals, kiyerek esev sheitarti la'adam harishon, just like I allowed the vegetables, the grass to Adam harishon, in a similar way, nasati lachem es koil, I'm now allowing you to eat all these animals as well. Now, the fact that Rashi has to immediately tell us already in our parsha that the Bnei Noach are going to be permitted to eat meat, that's understood, says the Rebbe, because we discussed a number of times that even though Rashi in his Pirush is not coming to answer questions that are going to come about, that are going to arise in a later pasuk in Torah Shebeksav, and certainly Rashi is not going to be bothered by and coming to answer things that come up in Torah Sheba'al Peh. Furthermore, says the Rebbe, since Pirush Rashi ala Torah is according to Pshutei Shel Mikra, it doesn't necessarily always even have to be Rashi's Pirush in accordance to the bottom line of how halacha will even paskin something. In other words, sometimes Rashi will say something that in the end result halacha wouldn't even be like that. So although that's true, but nevertheless, when Rashi is explaining a pasuk for Ben Chamish Lemikra, he does have to take into consideration the reality as it's seen by the Ben Chamish Lemikra, what Ben Chamish Lemikra sees around him. And therefore Rashi does immediately now have to explain that in later generations meat would become permitted. Because to just say that Hashem did not allow them to eat meat would be in contradiction to the Metzius, to the reality that the Ben Chamish sees that we do shecht animals and we eat meat. So all of that is not a problem, why Rashi even mentions this heter. But what's not understood is, number one, in order to explain this detail, it would have been enough to say just the halacha, the din, that when the children of Noach came along, Hashem now allowed them to eat meat, as we'll see later. But why does it make a difference over here to know the exact source of this din in the pasuk? Why is Rashi quoting the psukim in Parshas Noach? Point number 2, says the Rebbe, if Rashi does find it necessary, for whatever reason it is, to quote the pasuk, seemingly what should have he quoted from the pasuk? All he needed to quote from that pasuk was the beginning of the pasuk. Kol remes asher uchai, all of the crawling, moving things that are alive, lachem yiyeh la'achla, you'll be able to eat. Which from this would be clear that Hashem eventually did allow meat to be eaten. So the question over here is, number one, why is Rashi omitting seemingly the main point, the words of lachem yiyeh la'achla of that pasuk? He just says the goymer. And number 2, the point that he does add is seemingly something that's, why is he adding this whole arichus keyerek esev, that they're going to be allowed to eat it just like the grass or the vegetables that I allow to Adam Harishon, I'm now allowing you to eat these animals as well. Why is that aspect of the pasuk of Parshas Noach relevant over here? Says the Rebbe, the explanation of all of this is, with Rashi's Pirush, he's actually coming to answer a number of questions in our psukim. And what is that? Number 1, why is it relevant at all in the story of Bereishis? We're speaking about how Hashem created people and animals and so on. Why is it relevant over here at all to know what they are going to eat? Seemingly, we're just speaking about the general idea of creation, not about the needs of the creatures. The Rebbe explains the bracha that it says Pru Revu, that Hashem says you'll be to be fruitful and multiply. That we can understand what it's doing here. That is part of Ma'aseh Bereishis. They are explaining, these words are explaining how the creation is going to have a continuation up until today. Because Hashem created people and animals, etc., in a way that they should be fruitful and multiply. We can also understand what Hashem commands and says, Uredu b'dgas hayam, telling Adam, you're going to be the one in charge. You're going to be ruling over the fish and the animals. We can understand why that's included in Ma'aseh Bereishis, because that's part of the description of how Adam is created. In other words, what's unique about him from all other creatures, as the pasuk says, Na'asa Adam b'tzalmeinu k'dmuseinu, Hashem says, let's make man in our image. The yirdu b'dgas hayam, and Adam is going to rule over the fish and animals. And as a continuation to that, as the pasuk says, Vayivra Elikim, Hashem created Adam in his image and told him to rule over all the animals. So all of that is understood how it fits into Ma'aseh Bereishis. But when it's speaking about these psukim of what Adam is going to eat, what the animals are going to eat, this is not understood. What connection does all of this have to the story of Ma'aseh Bereishis, of creation? Point number 2, even if we should find an explanation why the command to Adam is relevant over here, what he's allowed to eat, what he's going to eat, it's still not understood. Why does Hashem have to tell Adam and his wife what the animals and birds are going to eat? Furthermore, says the Rebbe, the birds were created a day earlier. They're created on the 5th day of creation. Did they not eat anything until this command on the 6th day to Adam and his wife? The Rebbe says you cannot answer that this is all part of the command, Uredu b'dgas hayam, that you, Adam and Chava, are going to rule over the animals and the fish. And since Hashem is appointing them as rulers over all of animal life, and therefore Hashem is telling them what the animals should eat, because seemingly that's not the pshat of Uredu. Uredu does not mean that they're in charge of what the animals are going to eat. So these are the questions that were bothering Rashi. In order to answer these questions, Rashi quotes from the pasuk the words, in the two pasukim together, the words Lochem yiyeh la'achla ulechol chayas haaretz, that the vegetables, the grasses is going to be what you're going to eat and what all the animals are going to eat. In other words, Rashi is connecting these two psukim together with that vav, ulechol chayas haaretz, and is explaining that what the pasuk is saying is, the pasuk is coming to teach us this point. Hishva lahem behemois v'chayis l'maychol. The main point the pasuk is coming to say is actually the fact that the pasuk is, the end of this first pasuk and connecting it with the next pasuk, is not coming to tell us any isur. It's not coming to tell us what they're not allowed to eat. It's not coming to say what a person is allowed to eat, what an animal is allowed to eat. The pasuk is coming to emphasize just one point. This similarity, this common denominator between people and animals as far as their food is concerned. The fact that Adam is not allowed to eat meat, the fact that he's not allowed to kill animals and eat meat, that is actually, we can understand that from that first pasuk. And from the fact that the pasuk says that you're going to be eating the vegetables and the grass, that tells us automatically that you're not going to eat meat. What is the pasuk coming to say besides for that? The pasuk is immediately coming to add that grass is also the food for the animals and the birds. The pasuk wants to emphasize the similarity between the person and the animals. Now, it is true that the animals are not going to be only eating grasses and vegetables. You do have animals that eat meat as well. That's true. But the comparison is only from one side. In other words, it's not about the meat side, it's only regarding the vegetables and plant size. It's only as far as what the person eats. In other words, whatever the person eats is exactly the same things that animals eat. And this is why Rashi is mayrich, he elaborates and repeats again this comparison. Ach kol yerek esev yoichlu yachad kulam. As far as the vegetables, the grasses, and these things, this is something that everyone eats, the animals and the person. Why is this so relevant when we're speaking about how Adam is created? To bring out this comparison, this similarity between his food and the food of the animals. Says the Rebbe, this is understood. Earlier on, the pasuk was speaking about the mila, the quality, the greatness of man over all other creatures. He is created b'tzelem elikim, in the image of Hashem, and therefore he is the one to rule over all other creatures, as the pasuk says, uredu. It's in continuation to this that the pasuk is coming to say, that the person is compared to animals in what he eats, coming to tell us that despite how great the person is over all other creatures, he must still remember that the bottom line is he's still also a creature. He's also a creation. Hashem created him in a way that in food, which is going to be what all living things depend on, he is going to be similar to the animals of the earth, which reminds Adam that he's in the same category, in a certain sense, as these behemoths and chayas. Says the Rebbe, but it's still not understood. The pasuk says clearly, uredu, that you are going to be ruling. So it seems to be that he is higher and he is greater than the animals, etc. So Rashi immediately continues and says, Hashem did not allow them to kill an animal to eat meat. In other words, as far as this is concerned, he does not have the permission to rule over the animals. Yes, he's the ruler over the animals, but it doesn't mean he can go and kill animals. And that's why we asked before, why doesn't Rashi just say that it's also for them to eat meat? Rashi says, Lo hirsha. Hashem did not allow them. It doesn't just say nesru or something like that. Because the emphasis over here is not about the isur of eating meat. It's rather, again, coming to explain what's the content of uredu. I gave you permission to rule, but it does not include to go and kill animals to eat their meat. V'loi hirsh, I'm letting you rule, but only to a certain extent. According to this, we could also understand Rashi's reason why eating meat would be a problem only if you kill an animal to eat its meat. Because if the whole yesod, the basis for the Isser, is only to negate from the person in regards to his food, this idea of uredu on the animals, in other words, that your rulership over the animals is only to a certain extent, but you can't go ahead and kill the animals for food, that itself tells us automatically that would be only in order, it's only if you're going to kill the animal to eat its meat. That type of eating meat would show that you're considering yourself such a ruler to such an extent that you could even kill the animal to eat its meat. But if it dies by itself, there would be no isur for eating the meat, because that's not expressing then a greater rulership over the animals. Says the Rebbe, according to this, we're also going to understand the arichos of Rashi in the end of his pirush. When Rashi wants to tell us about the fact that Bnei Noach are allowed to eat meat, so seemingly the question comes up immediately. The whole point of not killing an animal to eat its meat was to make sure that man does not forget that he's no more than a creature created by Hashem. So did the Bnei Noach not need to have to be cautioned about this and warned about this? This is why Rashi is Meirich. And he quotes from the Pasuk, the Heter. And Rashi is quoting also, as we said before, the end of the pasuk, Ki Yerek Esav, that it's going to be like the grass. And Rashi also adds and explains in the words of the pasuk, is like the grass that I was matir to Adam Orishon. What's Rashi trying to do? Rashi is trying to indicate and to point out the fact that the meat was permitted to Bnei Noach is not because they don't have to be limited in regards to this or do the rulership when it comes to their food. In other words, it's not that they don't need this reminder. Rather, it's a heter. In other words, for the same reason that Hashem gave a heter for the Yerek Esav for Adam Orishon. He needed that to be healthy, to be alive, etc. In a similar way, yes, now Hashem is permitting the Bnei Noach also to have. There was just a heter for them to be able to have this food, this meat as well, to be able to survive, to be able to live. And therefore, Rashi doesn't mention the words lochem yiyeh l'achlo, because it's not the point of the heter of eating meat itself. His main point that Rashi is trying to bring is the reason for the heter, that it's just like the vegetables, the grass that I allow to Adam Orishon, which again, the reason for that is pashut for his health. In a similar way, I'm allowing you now, it's a special heter that Hashem is allowing them to eat the meat as well. Says the Rebbe, the Hira of all of this and Avodas Hashem is this idea that a person, along with his Uradu rulership, must know and must feel that he is no more than a created being, is not only to make sure he doesn't have gaiva, arrogance, haughtiness, and the negative things that could come out of not properly understanding what the rulership entails, but more importantly, the very essence of the Uradu, the very essence that the person is higher than the animals and rules the animals, is dependent on this. That is, when a person thinks that Uradu means that he himself is the ruler with his own power, with his own might, then in fact he cannot rule over the animals, because then he's in fact equal to all the animals and to all the other creatures. It's only when he remembers the truth that he is similar to everything else, to all other creatures, and the koyach to rule over everything else is only coming from Hashem. This is the only time that he could be a true roidah, then he can be in fact a proper ruler. Because it's not his rulership, as the Pasuk says, that Hashem Elokecha hu anoysin l'cha koyach la'asos chayil. Hashem is the one that gives you the power to be successful and to do everything. And therefore it's in fact the rulership of Hashem, the creator of the person and the one who runs the world. As Rashi himself says on the words v'yirdu b'dgas hayom, Rashi says the word v'yirdu could be translated, could be understood in two ways. V'yirdu is from the word of ridu, which is this idea of rulership, but it could also be from the idea of yirida, descent. If the person is zoich, if the person merits, then he's right, he's ruling over the animals. Loi zoch, if he's not zoicha, if he does not merit, then he becomes lower than the animals and they rule over him. And the Rebbe says, what's the inner pirush in these words? The Rebbe says the word zacha doesn't only mean merits. The word zacha is also from the word zichuch, becoming refined, becoming more purified. When a person refines himself, he removes himself from gaiva and yeshus. Rather, he recognizes that he's going with the koyach of Hashem. That's when he's roidebem. That's when he's higher than the animals and he rules over the animals. But if loy zacha, if he did not refine himself enough, rather he feels his own existence, his own yeshus, he feels as if he's ruling with his own power, then he becomes lower than the animals. Not only is he equal to all the animals, but rather he's actually lower than them. Says the Rebbe v'yesh loimer that this is also the inner tam, the inner reason why Hashem says in continuation to the command of a Rudu to rule over the animals, Hashem is also comparing them to the animals and what they eat, in order that he should be able to come through this to the understanding of what the proper Urudu is, of what's the proper attitude and way of rulership. Says the Rebbe, from all of this we have here also at our times, Chazal say Atam Kriyim Adam, that who is really called Adam. That's mainly referring to Yidden. Now Hashem says to the Yidden a similar idea, this idea of Urudu. They are going to be the rulers. The Pasuk says, the Amdu Zarim V'Rod Soinkim, foreigners are going to get up and take care of the Yidden's sheep. Yidden are going to be ruling over everyone as far as work is concerned. In fact, even in Zman HaGolus, when the Goyim are the Melachim and the Sorim, kings and officers, etc., the Pasuk says, V'hayu Melachim Oimnayich V'Sorisayim Nikisayich, that their kings and the princesses will be taking care of your children, etc. And here we have the Hoirah. If a person relies on Koich V'Yotzim Yad, he thinks it's all his own might and power. Even if he wants to say it because he is Adam, he's Adam Elyon, he's compared to Hashem, he has such great milos, he has such great virtues. But if he thinks it's all his own qualities, his own greatness, then he's loy zacha, and therefore the animal ends up ruling. And in applying this in the case of the Yidden and the nations, not only that the Yidden don't act with him in a way of respect as someone that's a proper ruler, but on the contrary, and furthermore, even in his own feeling, he ends up feeling lowly in front of them and in front of Goyishkeit generally. It's only when Zacha, when a person refines himself, he recognizes that Hashem is the one that gives us the power for all of our successes. And therefore, he's not going with his own wisdom and understanding. Rather, lahavdil, he's going with the Chacham of Hashem, with the Torah, with the Shulchan Aruch. He's going with the Koyach of the Mishaleach. Then he is the one that's roida, he is the one that rules. And we see begilui this idea, V'hayu Melachim Imnayach, even in the time of Galus, till finally will come to V'amdu Zarim V'Rod Soinchem B'Vias Mashiach Tzedkenu.